I'd like to immediately pass the floor now to our dear colleague Ademar José Gevaerd, who has been instrumental in organizing. He has been organizing congresses in Brazil for many years, being a pioneer in this field. He is a journalist, ufologist, speaker, and editor of the UFO magazine, the oldest publication on ufology in the world, originating from Brazil. He is the Emeritus Director for Brazil of the Mutual UFO Network, Coordinator for South and Central America of the International Coalition for Extraterrestrial Research, and the author of the work Crop Circles in Brazil, theme, the history of UFOs in the country. So please, feel free. If you want to approach the lectern, if you want to speak from here, feel free, Dr. Ademar. You have 15 minutes and an additional 5 minutes of tolerance from our table. Due to physiognomic reasons. I've had some issues with my feet, and that causes me some discomfort. I want to thank Your Excellencies, Senator Eduardo Girão, and the other senators who signed and approved the protocol, the request, the motion for the realization of this event, namely Senator Elisiane Gama and Senators Alessandro Vieira, Isalci Lucas, Jorge Cayuru, Marcos Duval, Paulo Rocha, and José Antonio Regouf. We are making history in Brazilian and worldwide ufology. This is the first time that a Senate takes the initiative to address the UFO issue. I would like to ask you to display the slide already. The title of my presentation is Aeronautics Documents on UFOs. For those who might not know, and the Senator pointed out well, the Brazilian government, through the Brazilian Air Force, has already released 20,000 pages of documents, which are available at the National Archives here in Brasilia. However, you need to make an appointment to go see them because, according to the employees of the National Archives, it's the most sought-after section of documents. Well, the history of UFOs in Brazil began in 1500 with the arrival of Pedro Álvares Cabral. He encountered indigenous people who described anomalous balls of light that pursued them, which they referred to as curupiras, or boitatá. After that, we had, as the Senator rightly mentioned, ufology started on June 24th, 1947. A month later, we had the first close encounter with an extraterrestrial being, which happened in Pitanga, Paraná. This is of great importance. And the first abduction, which involves the taking of people into UFOs, and you will hear a presentation on this topic from my colleague, Tony Najar, took place in Brazil. So, Brazil is a pioneer in everything. Moreover, due to this pioneering effort in 2004, through the Brazilian Ufologists Commission and in the UFO magazine, we launched the campaign UFOs, Freedom of Information Now. It was this campaign that led to the opening of 20,000 pages of previously classified documents from the Air Force that are no longer classified. For this purpose, we took advantage of the Access to Information Law of 2011, which enabled us to access this material. However, our intention in accessing this material was not solely for ufologists. It was for society as a whole. Society benefited from it, and ufologists are an integral part of society. Thus, we benefited equally. As a result, documents gradually emerged over time, decade after decade. From the 1950s to the 2020s, we have numerous and countless documents that can be scrutinized by anyone at the National Archives. This entire history began in 1954, as Senator Eduardo Girão mentioned, when Colonel João Adil de Oliveira visited the United States to gather information about flying saucers and received a strong indication from the Americans not to let this subject proliferate in Brazil, just as they did not want it to spread in the United States. However, being a true Brazilian, the Air Force captain returned to Brazil and declared that the UFO phenomenon is real, demands attention, and will be treated seriously by Brazilian authorities. We were the first country to take on this responsibility. Afterward, 2 organizations were created to investigate flying saucers. One is the System for the Investigation of Unidentified Aerial Objects, which operates within the 4th Regional Air Command in São Paulo. The other is the Operation Prato, based in the 1st Regional Command in Belém. Both are extremely important and will be discussed with expertise in this event. We also have something that no other country in the world has had, which is Decree 551/GC3, signed by none other than Brigadier Juniti Saito, who was the commander of the Brazilian Air Force at that time. This decree states that all existing UFO-related documents spread across various Air Force units throughout Brazil should be centralized in the National Archives. They were to be sent to Comdabra, the Brazilian Aerospace Defense Command, in Brasilia, and from there forwarded to the National Archives. This decree is still in effect. Not only do military personnel send reports, but also civilians who report sightings to the military. These sightings are then forwarded from Comdabra to the National Archives. So imagine, the number of pages must have exceeded 20,000 by now, as reports of unidentified flying object observations in the country keep emerging. In 2005, the Brazilian Ufologists Commission was unprecedentedly received at Sindacta and Comdabra, where we were able to present the Manifesto of Brazilian Ufology for the consideration of our military personnel. Moreover, in 2013, we were invited by the then Minister of Defense, Celso Amorim, to attend a meeting in Brasilia at the Brazilian Ministry of Defense to discuss this matter. This has never happened anywhere else in the world, but it happened in Brazil. Military personnel inviting ufologists to visit the facilities where documents are stored and scrutinize these documents, which were released starting from 2007. This achievement is owed, among others, to ufologist Fernando de Aragão Ramalho, who is present here and is a public servant of this house. These documents ended up at Comdabra and the National Archives, as I mentioned earlier. In São Paulo, the System for the Investigation of Unidentified Aerial Objects operated from 1969 to 1972 within the 4th Regional Air Command. Note, during the same period in the United States, there was Project Blue Book, which aimed to ridicule witnesses, discredit ufologists, and persecute ufology. Meanwhile, in Brazil, our military not only accepted collaboration from ufologists, but also praised witnesses, respecting their integrity. This is rare. Some of these procedures were even determined by Colonel Gilberto Zani de Mello, who was the commander of the System for the Investigation of Unidentified Aerial Objects, CIOANI. CIOANI had a structure that was not exactly public and announced, but it had transparency. Society could access documents, the organizational chart, and the identification of researchers. CIOANI published 2 bulletins containing crucial information about the UFO phenomenon throughout Brazil, including statistics and cases investigated by our military in the same way that civilian ufologists do. These are numerous documents. There's confidential there. This is important for society to observe. How many years was this kept classified? This remained classified for years, for decades, until it was released. That confidential there, that little stamp, is because this presentation has been given in other places as well. Now take a look. Within the drawings of unidentified flying objects, we even have cases of landed UFOs with occupants outside. This is absolutely unprecedented in the world. No other government has made documents available in this manner. In fact, at that time, cameras were rare in 1969. Not many people had them. So the researchers from CIOANI recorded occurrences reported by the population through drawings. These drawings are quite revealing as they include cases of landed UFOs, UFOs resting on the ground, and occupants outside making contact with humans. We also had Specific Directive Number 4 from 1989, which determined how to register flying sources in Brazil by military personnel. This resulted in a dossier with thousands of pages, which the late Brigadier José Carlos Pereira, who passed away 2 years ago, digitized and created other documents that release information about UFOs. This document here is the registration document for hotel traffic. Hotel traffic is what the military calls the UFO phenomenon. Hotel traffic. These cases can be found in almost all aeronautics facilities that haven't yet been sent to Comdabra and that haven't subsequently been addressed to the National Archive. Then we had 2 very important events. The official Night of UFOs, which will be addressed by one of my colleagues present here, if I'm not mistaken, Jackson, and Operation Prato, which will be discussed alongside the story of indigenous people having contact with extraterrestrial beings in Acre, with documents from IBAMA, the federal police, and other federal agencies. In short, the documents are numerous, and they are gradually coming to light. The opening of Brazilian ufology is not yet fully clarified, It's not complete, it's partial, but it has begun and had a very fruitful start. And what we are doing here today is part of that fruitful beginning. In fact, it's already part of the middle of the process. We are gathered here to address the subject in the Brazilian Federal Senate, which is an extremely rare occurrence. Our friends, the American and the British, almost couldn't believe it when I invited them to come, that we would be doing this work in the Federal Senate of the Republic of Brazil. In short, the documents are starting to emerge. They are numerous, they are revealing. They show the action of extraterrestrial beings on our planet, especially in our country, which is recognized as having one of the largest numbers of UFO occurrences in the world, second only to the United States, of course. There, everything seen is a UFO. But here we have concrete cases documented by military pilots, by civilian pilots. Not a single week goes by in Curitiba, where I reside in my office, without me receiving a call or contact from a civilian pilot who had their aircraft pursued or followed by unidentified flying objects. In short, does the secrecy still continue? Yes, it continues. The secret continues, but many nations have already made partial disclosures on the subject. In fact, I don't know if you can see it in the last line. The Vatican is the institution that holds the most information about flying saucers because its missionaries have been around the world for centuries. If someone in Africa saw an unidentified flying object, who would they report to? The local priest. If someone in 1820 in Mexico saw a flying object, saw an extraterrestrial being descend from a flying object, who would they report to? The local priest, and it's the same thing all over the world, in Oceania, in Asia, in South America. Thus, this struck a chord at the Vatican, and the Vatican began recording UFO occurrences, which are now estimated to be in the thousands. That's it. I'm very grateful for the opportunity given by Your Excellency Senator Eduardo Girão and the other senators I mentioned at the beginning. At the end, we need to present you with a letter, the Brasilia letter, in which we express what we believe about flying saucers, what we have already discovered about flying saucers in our country, and what we recommend to be done about it. The main item being the creation of a permanent joint commission, civilian and military, for organized UFO research. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. So much information has been brought here with official documents by our dear Ademar José Gevaerd. Once again, I am pleased to see that Brazil has a history with released archives and documented materials. I've heard that our armed forces hold respect for this subject. This is important because the rule for good coexistence is respect. Furthermore, as we mentioned, the American Senate itself recently held a public hearing in May, last month, on this topic, right in the United States. So it's very important to notice this synchronicity. I want to mention that we have a very good audience for Senate sessions. We have an audience of 1,300 people just on YouTube. There's also the broadcast on TV Senado, and we can't calculate the numbers there, but people do have a real interest in this subject, and it's our duty to provide a space here. In this House, democratically and inclusively, for all perspectives on topics that are also of interest to our population. I'd like to welcome more visitors who are arriving at the Federal Senate, who are here visiting, getting to know our facilities. Welcome, and thank you very much for your presence.